For more info on today's episode and all the episodes, go to kongos.com/podcast. You find links and photos and whatever we talk about. Also, subscribe on Apple, Stitcher, Google, however you get your podcasts. Hey, what's going on, everybody? We are KONGOS, and this is the Front Lounge. Welcome back, and welcome back to us. We've been away for a while. We haven't done an episode in a while, and there are some reasons for that, which we're going to get into. But breaking news. What do you guys want to talk about?
Breaking news. We left Epic Records. We've been trying to do that for a little while, and we were finally able to get out of our deal.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't get into the details with you, but if you want to find out more about this story, you can watch Bus Call, our documentary series, which is coming up later this year. But yeah, it's a big deal for us, you know, and consequently, we're going to be releasing music in a very different way, which is kind of exciting for us.
Yeah, which probably is the biggest piece of first news we'll get into. Next week, on next week's podcast, you'll be able to hear our first new track off our new album and new material exclusively on the Front Lounge for a day or two before it comes out on iTunes and Spotify and all that. So be sure to subscribe to this podcast because that'll be the first place you can hear it.
I think in general, we're going to start doing stuff like that, you know, where either the podcast or our newsletter is going to be the first place that you get to hear new stuff or see new videos or gather new content in general, because being able to get our fans, our hardcore fans, to see stuff first is important. I think, you know, it's important for us because it spreads the word in a certain way, but it's also kind of fun for you guys if you're really into us.
Yeah, we feel quite liberated by the new world of music because we're always probably going to be an album band. You know, we love albums and we love a kind of cohesive thing that's about an hour long or whatever, but we also like singles and we also like we've got a bunch of music that doesn't necessarily fit into an album, so we're pretty excited that we'll be able to release music in a variety of ways now.
Yeah, and we're a lot more prolific than the last few years of releasing music has proven to be. So that's what we're most excited about. Is we've been in the studio for a long time, writing new material, recording new material, and so we'll be releasing that in creative ways over the next few months.
I just realized that we haven't talked about the Bus Call screening on the podcast yet. I don't think.
Oh yeah.
So a couple months ago, we screened the first 4 episodes of Bus Call, which we'd cut slightly down into like a 90-minute festival cut at the Phoenix Film Festival. And it was a sold-out screening. It was really fun, actually, to kind of see this work on a big screen and see the crowd get, you know, stuff landed, which, you know, you never know. When you're making a documentary, you realize, are people going to relate to this? Are they going to get the jokes? Are they going to get the emotional stuff? And it really felt like it worked. So we're kind of excited about pushing that forward.
Well, especially the last few days of editing before that screening, everyone was up for a good 24 hours, and then the days leading up to that were long days of editing, and every joke and every little moment for most of us was kind of like, is this funny? Is this dramatic? Is this anything anymore?
It was nice to see other people in the screening laughing other than us and the crew, because we knew we could make ourselves laugh, and we knew we could make Mo and Mick and Jason laugh, and they could make us laugh. But to see other people react to it and know that it connected to, you know, across a broader spectrum of people was really encouraging. And that's, I mean, we're getting close on that, or closer, I would say. Yeah. We're kind of working on the last episodes now on the editing, and they're really starting to get there. And I think the whole story and shape of all 9 or 10 episodes is really starting to come together.
Yeah, that screening, along with going to movies more regularly lately, has reconvinced me of something I always knew, which is that seeing movies in the theater is really nice, especially certain kinds of movies, you know, obviously blockbusters and that kind of thing, and then funny movies where laughter is contagious is really nice. So I've been going to movies more recently because of that.
Where have you been going?
ArcLight. Yeah, ArcLight's an awesome theater.
I just made me realize that I don't remember the last time I went to a movie other than our screening. It's probably been like a year or more.
Los Angeles, say what you want about Los Angelians or Angelinos, whatever they call themselves. they are very, very good movie-going audiences, I find.
Because half of them worked on it.
Half of them work on it, so they respect they sit there quietly, enjoy the movie. And I've never seen as many people sit through the end of the credits, and not just at like a Marvel movie where they want to see a secret scene. It's because they're waiting to see their name or their friend's name or their son, daughter's name.
Everyone who walks out is talking about what a great part that was for that actor, or what, like they're very
so many opinions about
or industry talk. And also ArcLight's funny because the way they introduce the movies is a guy comes out and he's auditioned for that part. There were probably like hundreds of people that auditioned for the part of telling the audience what the etiquette is of watching a movie. He comes out and says, put your phones away. This movie starring so-and-so, directed by so-and-so.
There's like a movie warm-up guy.
Yeah, he's a movie warm-up guy, and it's like he's so animated, or he or she is so animated, and you're like, these people have auditioned for these parts.
The one time the guy sounded like Kyle Mooney's stoner character, though.
Oh, yeah. And maybe he's working on a character.
Yeah.
Well, you got to audition for pretty much everything in this city. You want to serve coffee, you got to send in a headshot and be able to ask, how you doing? Would you like room for milk? You got to say that in the right way, otherwise you won't get hired.
Oh, well, did you hear about, Danny and I were thinking of, because we don't have a pool, as most people in LA don't have a pool. They go either to a public pool or a private pool, and we were looking into going to the Roosevelt Hotel, which has a pool. And so Danny looked into it, and it costs a certain amount a year or for the summer or whatever. But more importantly, it gives you an application form that you have to fill out, and you have to give them your name, your Instagram handle, your height, a headshot, and your annual income.
Right, yeah.
And then they approve or disapprove of you coming to the pool.
It reminds me of the Caddyshack. The pond's probably good for you guys.
Or it's like a LA story when Steve Martin is calling the French restaurant to see if he can get a reservation. They're like, yeah, you can get one 18 months from now. And then they ask for his bank statement, and they ask what he was thinking of having. He's like, oh, maybe the duck or the beef. And they check his bank statement and go, you will have the chicken.
We'll post a link to that. If you haven't seen that movie, LA Story, it's probably the best movie ever made about LA. It just captures everything about this place. The
restaurant's called Lidio, or The Idiot. If you
the best movie made about LA is Manhattan by Woody Allen.
So yeah, we're going to be back into regular podcasting, so we'll be updating you every week with new stuff that's coming. But yes, recap, make sure you listen next week. You will hear a brand new song before anybody else, and before it's even available on Spotify and stuff like that.
We might even start filming some of the podcasts occasionally.
Short little segments, maybe do some Instagram or Facebook live streams. Have it be interactive a bit. Do some question and answers, as long as it's not what's it like to be in a band with your brothers.
Yeah, and as long as we, put on our podcast clothes in time.
Pajama podcasting is much more fun, I think, but it doesn't look as good on video.
We won't be filming on those days.
I think that's why Bill Bird has never done a video podcast, because he likes to be able to just lie around on his couch or his bed and just you picture his ravings and rantings and him just sitting around in his boxers drinking coffee or something.
Sometimes he's literally in the bathroom. You can hear the reverb. He's doing it from the bathroom.
He's shooting the shit. All right, music only. So what we're going to talk about? What are we making out of?
I put this song on here. Everyone knows the song. I Put a Spell on You. But if you listen to, I don't know if it's the original version. It's the one
Screamin' Jay.
Yeah, by Screamin' Jay Hawkins. For me, this is one of those songs that there is only one version of. Every other one, even the ones that are not bad, like Etta James has got a version that's pretty good. It's just still, when you listen to the Screamin' Jay Hawkins one, that's one of those ones that basically should never be done again.
Because it sounds like he really believes it.
Yeah.
It's not... The lyric is so cheesy when somebody doesn't really believe it. You gotta be into voodoo or something like that.
Didn't Nina Simone do one too?
Actually, I think that's who I'm thinking of, Nina Simone, not Etta James.
Oh, that's a pretty good version.
But his version is so crazy and like maniacal that it puts a totally different spin on the song. It's not, you don't think of it as like, oh, I put a spell on you and lovey-dovey.
No,
and all
it's
that stuff.
dark.
Yeah, it's dark. We'll throw a link up to that. It's a really cool song.
In the Uber on the way home the other day, Supertramp song came on, the Logical song. It's one of their bigger songs. I'm sure you would recognize it if you looked it up as kind of a classic rock hit. So I remembered that I was, kind of into Supertramp a little bit, so I decided to play it. I played it for Eve, my little 17-month-old daughter, and discovered it's her favorite band, recently. She just went nuts. That song and another song called Dreamer, dancing all around the house. And it makes you listen and view music in a different way when you see somebody who doesn't yet have opinions, just react to something and kind of have a visceral reaction where you just want to dance or enjoy it. So
that's why yesterday when we were rehearsing, and she was over here at the studio and watching us rehearse quietly, she at the end clapped and said her more. She goes, "More?" And that was the best applause we've ever gotten at any show, even better than Brazil.
She goes, "Yay!" Clap, 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 clap. More?
Best encore ever.
It's more like more?
Yeah.
More?
So, I mean, we played like to 15,000 people in Brazil at Lollapalooza. It was great, but I think this wins for best audience.
Music business? Well, we already covered that.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk more about music business stuff, but...
Well, I guess let's just talk about the way that things have changed. No, things have changed so much that everything feels open now. It's a little bit confusing and chaotic in terms of trying to figure out what our release plan is and what are we doing and when is the album coming out and all this sort of thing. But on the other side of it, it feels very freeing because there is no rule. You look at artists out there that are putting out a song every week and then an album comes, or it's only an EP and they're just doing a bunch of Instagram videos of them performing them live. It's completely open, and that's what we're looking forward to, trying to find out what is the correct plan for us and release schedule, I guess. I
think the other part of it is most people know that your record label, that's what you need to make music and put it out, but there are a lot of pieces in the puzzle, and the word or the term record label doesn't necessarily mean the same thing anymore, because there's so many other pieces of the picture, like publishing. We still have our publishing deal with Sony, and then there's the neighboring rights, and then there's, business management and collection agencies like ASCAP and BMI. So this money and the actual business of music is chopped into so many little pieces with so many moving parts that it does make it a little bit of a minefield to figure out, okay, well, I just want to fucking put a song out, and, how many hoops do I have to jump through to get people to hear it? So that's what we've been struggling with over the last couple of years, and finally now we feel like we're on a path and a trajectory.
Yeah, so let's move on to some gear. Do you want to talk about your spring reverb, and then I'll talk about the really exciting piece of gear?
Oh, it's not our spring reverb, although we got a couple little spring reverbs. But Mick, our front of house engineer, is loaning us his spring reverb that he built. It's kind of like a kit, you get the springs and you get the amp and the tank and everything like that, and you put it together.
Well, yeah, to explain exactly what it is, it's reverb, which most people kind of have an idea of, is like, kind of a echo, or it lengthens the sound like you're in a big space. Well, there's different ways to achieve that, so, with different kinds of devices, like a digital plug-in where it emulates something, or in the past they would actually play music out into a big hall and record the hall back, or another thing is called a plate. It's like a big sheet of metal that the sound kind of gets played through, and then you record that with microphones. Another way is a spring reverb, where it's actually literally a spring, like a long metal spring that's in this tank that reverberates. They make it reverberate with the music, and it's kind of translated back into a signal that comes into your recording device. So it's got a funny sound. It's kind of a nice, pleasant, natural sound, but it's also got a little bit of a boing, boing, boing to it, and
so maybe a good examples of where you would clearly hear spring reverb in action.
Old surf guitar, like...
Yeah, if you hear like old surf guitar, or, kind of the guitar part on the old James Bond themes, where it's got this long, echoey sound, but it's also got sort of a wobble to it, that's probably a combination of the guitar player using the whammy bar or the tremolo on his guitar, and also this reverb that kind of... Like if you ever taken a spring, like a bed spring, and plucked it, it's got sort of a wobbly sound, and so that people actually use that. To
add to the list of legendary gear that our dad has sold, which turned out to be legendary later, or kind of turned out to be sought after. He had a EMT 140 plate and an EMT 250 plate and a CS80 synth.
Yeah, which they were kind of top of the line gear back then, and they were quite expensive. But now the fact that they were made in limited quantities and people 40 years later want this stuff. You look at what they go for and they're like, Jesus, Dad, you could have bought a house.
It makes total sense though, because back then you're like, well, now we got reverb units and they take up one rack unit, and this plate reverb is the size of a mattress and it weighs hundreds of pounds, and you got to go store it somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I get if you're moving countries or whatever, you're like weighing whether you want to carry this thing around with you or not. But if you could look into the future and realize that it's probably worth like $50,000 or $100,000 or something.
No, they're like $5,000.
No, really?
I think so. Yeah.
You should have left one of us taking the spring reverb instead.
All for a thing that makes it's a funny idea to that much weight and that much. The more hassle it is, the more trouble it is, the more it turns out to be worth something later in the future.
And the better it sounds usually.
Yeah. So our other piece of gear for this week is not music related at all. Do you like corn tortillas, but you find them to be really dry and taste like plates a lot of the time? Well, you should make your own corn tortillas, which is what we've been doing lately. I don't know why. It just popped into my head, and I said I'm going to get a tortilla press and get some corn masa, which is the dough that is made from basically dried corn that's soaked in lime, but not lime like the fruit lime. Like it's lime. What is it called?
Yeah. Lime, like lime. Isn't it a base?
Yeah.
It's that kind of erodes stuff.
Yeah. It breaks.
It's probably because for that Ugly Delicious episode.
Oh yeah,
the
that's what it
taco
was.
episode, which is an awesome episode. But yeah, I mean, when you have a good fresh corn tortilla, like in Mexico or at a really good place here in LA, you think, holy shit, I really do love corn tortillas. And then you go buy it in the store and you're like, why doesn't it taste
They always
good?
have like fillers. They always have that stuff to keep them together and
War gum and stuff to make it elastic. And when you
tastes off the oil, it's like oil goes off. That's what they taste.
Yeah.
Like to me,
when you realize how easy it is to make, though, I mean, it's literally a 3-minute.
Well, not the
process.
masa. That's a bit of a process.
I'm not making the masa from scratch. That's a little crazy. But there are places here in town, obviously, like Guisados Tacos does make it from scratch, and their tacos are the best, or their tortillas are the best. But just using dried masa flour that you can get from anywhere, Whole Foods, online, Danny got some really good blue masa and white masa.
The gear, though, we're talking about is the press.
Yeah. So we'll put a picture up of one. I got one from Colombia that's made out of cast iron. Danny got a wood one. We've just gone fully crazy on corn tortillas. We've had them probably 7 out of the last 8 days for lunch here.
From scratch depends on how far you want to go back down the chain.
Yeah.
Because you could grow. What do they grind? They buy the corn kernels and then they grind it down. They have a grinder.
No, well, they let the corn. My understanding is they let the corn dry. They take the kernels, they soak them in the lime until the husks, or whatever you call the out part of it, breaks down. They remove that. Then it goes through a masher, and then you end up with this kind of mushy dough that you then would immediately make the tortillas out of.
Lime, as in,
like Danny was saying, the base,
okay.
not lime juice. And then what we're getting is kind of a dried version of that paste or a dough that you're left over with also. So now the process for that is that you mix that with water and salt, and technically you leave it an hour, but we've just been really urgently needing these tortillas, so we don't leave it for an hour.
Yeah.
Be cool. It would have been cool to do it that one time I grew that black Aztec corn. It's a 2,000-year-old variety. Like literally, the genetics go back 2,000 years. It's been an heirloom variety for that long.
Well, that makes me think of the meal that we had in Peru, in Lima, that we went to a traditional Peruvian restaurant, and the varieties of corn and potatoes that they have in that part of the world, it's kind of mind-blowing too.
I think just that restaurant alone served 19 potatoes, different kinds of potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the most amazing restaurant experiences we've had. It was us and our crew. We were doing a tour of Latin America, and we had 2 days in Lima, and we got there and we had nothing to do, no press, and the gig was the next day, so we kind of just said, well, let's go find something to eat, and we ended up at this restaurant, and it was It was a culinary experience, let me tell you. we did film it, and it's actually going to be featured a little bit in one of the episodes of Bus Call. But I mean, it's one of those restaurants where it's worth filming. It's getting close-ups of the food and just seeing the creativity and how it was put together.
It was also interesting because you started thinking about it and you reading about it, that obviously everything came from Peru or Central or South America. Originally, potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, all these things that now are what we consider staples of food around the world were actually originally from there.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see there. And then also how they've been now taking from other foods around the world. Japanese food has made its way into Peruvian food.
And spices and spices from the East. So that was something that I found really interesting, is that they didn't have chilies or peppers in India until the Europeans brought them there.
Yeah, isn't that they got this word pepper? They're chilies. I mean, all the fruiting stuff they're chilies, but they got pepper because that was the only comparison they had was in terms of spice. But pepper doesn't have capsaicin in it.
Which is crazy to think of, because Indian food is synonymous with
chilies, right?
So I just can't imagine what that food used to be like before.
It's probably boring like English food.
I doubt that.
Well, yeah.
Have you guys been to Chili's 2 in the airport lounges? It's TOO. It basically means Chili's also.
I would love to be in that, quote, branding meeting, Okay, we've got this restaurant chain called Chili's. What we want to do is a spin-off. It's called Chili's 2, but not the number 2.
Did you guys see that IHOP changing their name to IHOB? Was that just a marketing thing, or did they actually change it? Does anyone know?
I have no idea.
They changed.
I
saw it, but
they announced that it was burgers or something, International House of Burgers. But
that seems to be the thing now.
I was talking to Dad about it the other day, and I think he said that there's a movement that they're trying to distance themselves from International House of Prayer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't know for that.
What?
Yeah.
And that was the reason behind changing to burgers?
Now this is like fourth-hand information, because I think Dad heard it somewhere and he told me, and I'm probably misrepresenting it.
Yeah. I've never had buttermilk prayers.
Either way, I just think it's interesting now, because the response on Twitter and everything was mixed, as everything is on Twitter.
Right.
Total
the thing
marketing.
Is now, you just do something. And it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, the result. It's just trying to get people reminded that you exist.
Yeah. Well,
they change our name to
the vitriol directed at a pancake shop was weird to me, but
yeah. All right. Well, so we're going to keep this one short so that we can continue and get things rolling for the music and everything we're going to be putting out next week. But I'm trying to think of this deep thought that I had, and it's not coming to me. But I wrote down here that when you look at anything that's hard to do, you have to apply a system. And I think that's something that we've been struggling with, and I've been feeling that I personally have been struggling with lately, is trying to accomplish this mammoth task of what we're trying to do, put out 25 songs, finish a documentary series, and we're doing the bulk of it ourselves, is that we have to start systematizing that. And then you can apply that to all kinds of disciplines throughout history. You look at something like yoga, their task of you're trying to become a better person to, whatever the deep goals of yoga are. It's a systemized system. It's a redundant systemization. But you know what I'm saying, that there appears to be no other way than to break things down into smaller tasks and to try to develop some.
There are bands who have done it. System of a Down.
Joey's using the podcast to get us to conform to his calendar, right? Yeah. He's like, they're not conforming to my calendar. I'm going to bring this up on the podcast so that they can
put us on the spot to publicly, commit to doing something.
Well, you're saying to remove the little obstacles.
I think there's areas where chaos is necessary, and we know where that works. That's in the studio or in creating.
Or you mean
artwork.
happy accident?
Yeah. What I mean is that I don't necessarily think that you should it should inhabit every aspect. Like we should go into the studio, switch on all the gear and say, let's try this, plug that one in, try this, you play this, do that. I'm not saying we should change that. But then clearly, you know, the reason we got the first 18 or 19 podcasts done was because we just said we're doing a podcast every week. And then it's basically committing to something, and it's a calendar, or it's some idea, some abstract structure
I think
that
like
makes it easier.
With anything, it needs an initial push to get some momentum, because the most difficult part is because it's a mammoth task, it just becomes overwhelming when you think about it as this huge whole that has to be completed. It saps you of energy because you realize you don't have the energy at that moment to complete all of it at once. So like anything, I think we need and all you out there listening, if you're looking to get something difficult done, is just tackling one thing at a time.
Like trying to pollute the ocean. If you try to do it all at once, it'll be too difficult. But if you do it very slowly.
Well, there's a legendary yoga teacher, Dave Swenson, who talks about overcoming resistance to practice. And it's a very simple kind of thing to say, but when you put into practice, it really helps. It's don't think about, if you really don't feel like doing something, don't think about just trying to get through the whole sequence or the whole hour and a half practice. Go stand on your mat and just stand there, and then say you're going to do, 5 sun salutations. And if you get through that, then all of a sudden momentum takes over. It's like when you push a rock, just that little tiny push all of a sudden gets it rolling, and eventually it stops. But
well, yeah, it's even at a superficial level, it's like this trickery of yourself, the same way you would basically trick a dog into going on a walk, or a little kid into eating vegetables they don't want to eat or something. We have to do the same thing with yourself, and I'm finding I'm having to do that more and more often, because the overwhelming thought of a bigger task just puts you into a state of like freezing. So
I still play airplane with my vegetables.
Anyway,
what is that joke? There's a joke along. I was taking a bath and my wife came in and she said, "You're so immature." And, I fucked it up now. I can't remember. What is it?
Something about, I can't remember, rubber duckies.
Yeah,
or
something along those lines. Yeah. How rude of her to interrupt me while I was playing with my rubber duckies away. That's not very. Just let's edit this out.
No, I think fucking up a joke is sometimes funnier than the actual joke, so we're gonna leave that in.
You can rely on me for that.
Well, anyway, here's the thing: Is
that a deep thought though, that you got to systematize shit? I mean,
no, he's literally trying to just get us to comply with his.
Yeah, he's trying to trick us into fucking. All right, we'll use Wunderlist. Right? I mean, I get Wunderlist. It's this app that we use for doing tasks. I literally ignore the fucking notifications.
Right. I know what you're getting at. You're basically saying the obstacles to stuff are usually smaller than you think.
They're small and they're very mechanical. Yeah. That we don't need to think of every major problem and thing in our life as this great big unattackable thing. It can be broken down, and there can be a mechanical approach to getting through the majority of issues, challenges, goals, or whatever.
Yeah. Rome wasn't built in, how does that go again? How does that joke go? Rome wasn't built in
24 hours.
Yeah. Right. Well, so here's here's what's happening is next week we're putting out a podcast.
Right. 1 week at a time.
Yeah. The first song that we've put out in a very long time. We're very excited about. So tell your friends to tune in next week to hear that song, and that is the first step in our
committing to a system.
Yes.
Well, I do have an actual deep thought if you guys want to talk about it. I mean,
oh, here we go.
Yeah. I had this thought the other day, and I just wrote it down because I thought this makes sense to me now, but then sometimes you go and read it and you don't really know if it makes sense. But I had an idea that if people are conscious of more events than in previous times, which it kind of feels like, you go on Twitter and you literally hear about every news from every part of the world, and it just flies by in this feed of consumption, and you know more than you did in any past epoch. Then I had this idea that if you're conscious of more events, then you have to be less conscious of each event. Like you can't internalize a piece of news as deeply if you've got 100 or 1,000 pieces of news, and that and it's kind of also a simple idea that you have limited brain space or limited quantity. But
I mean, I think they're both. I think it's both true and not true, because we don't know what the capacity of a person is. But at the same time, I've got like real evidence that is true with myself. In terms of I'm superficially aware of a lot of bullshit.
Yeah,
I'm not deeply aware of things.
The capacity of a human brain is probably way bigger than we give it credit. Simultaneously, the overflow of information and news that we're getting now means that we are giving less attention to any individual item.
Yeah, Paul McCartney released that album, Memory Almost Full, and that was before Instagram added stories. So,
well, I think semantically maybe it's better to say that if you're aware of more events, rather than conscious, because, well, at least for me, conscious implies some higher level of awareness than just being, passively receiving information.
I guess that leads to the question, is consciousness or awareness or attention, these words that we use to kind of describe the same thing, even though they're not necessarily interchangeable. Is it a limited resource? And it does feel like it's a limited. You only have so much that you can allocate at any one given time. I mean, that can change. Sometimes you feel like you can pay more attention or less attention. But it definitely feels like it's a limited resource. And so if you increase the number of inputs that we take, news, events, all this input that comes into our life through our different senses, and you have only a limited amount of attention that you can allocate, then each input is going to get less.
Yeah, I always get into this argument with a friend of ours in Phoenix, because he always says people are more intelligent now. And I just think that's just so false. That I don't think people have ever been. I can't say ever. Maybe there have been periods of literal heightened intelligence and diminished intelligence and all that stuff. But it feels like it's been the same throughout history, and that a huge discovery, a round wheel. I wouldn't have thought of a round wheel on my own. We take all this stuff for granted that's been given to us.
I think a massive pool of information and knowledge that's been gathered over generations, for thousands and thousands of years. We all have access to it now on our iPhone. And you think because you can Google something and you know the answer to it, that doesn't mean intelligence. That's simply information gathering, which is now easier than ever. So if anything, there's less resistance to getting information. Therefore, you have to make less effort and maybe less intelligence.
But as we get closer on artificial intelligence and as that starts to grow, I think we're going to start seeing that they are going to be more able to actually define closer what intelligence is, to at least human intelligence. Maybe there's something beyond that, but they're getting closer to being able to define that, and therefore to see that it is perhaps material in nature, and therefore it must be finite.
Well, I haven't watched the latest Westworld, so let's stop it there before you give me spoilers.
Yeah, I don't even understand what the phrase artificial intelligence means. I mean, I get the basic idea. I just don't know what they mean by that, because is it programming that you'd have to ask somebody who lives in that world?
It's like sugar versus sweet and low. That's pretty much the difference.
I think they categorize it differently. They talk about artificial intelligence that will have some kind of awareness, which I'm not sure how you test, and then artificial intelligence, which is self-modifying programs.
Yeah, inevitably all these conversations end up with what does awareness mean, because it's very hard to define even in a human what awareness means. So it's basically seems to be a scale of this thing we call awareness, which is basically indefinable other than through your own experience.
Yeah.
Well, we'd like to make you aware. Again, to repeat, next week, listen in. We're going to play a song on the podcast. It will probably be in the middle of the podcast somewhere, so you're going to have to do some work and actually listen to us shoot the shit and ramble before you get to hear the song. Frontlounge.com. No, what is it? KONGOS.com/podcast. That's the website. And good to talk to you guys. Really liked what you had to say. The audience, you guys were really insightful in this one. And we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.